if people were rational. I don't think they are, by the way. Luckily for us, 98% of them aren't, because you couldn't be in the top 2% if everybody else was as smarter than you. Why hasn't Apple bought $20 billion of Bitcoin and made $100 billion overnight yet? The answer is they're afraid.
Entering an era of worldwide crypto adoption? 2021 was a breakthrough year for crypto adoption, but what about 2022? Are we heading into an era of worldwide adoption wherein a majority of countries go forward to accept crypto as a legal tender? And if not, what is stopping major governments and big companies such as Apple and the likes of Elon Musk himself from adopting and profiting from crypto? Keep watching to the very end to find out. Janet Yellen talks crypto.
Couldn't get through an interview without asking about crypto, but in particular, Russia just said they would accept Bitcoin as a payment for their energy. What does that say to you about where we are in the crypto conversation?
Well, crypto is obviously grown by leaps and bounds, and it's now playing a significant role, not really so much in transactions, but in investment decisions of lots of Americans with thinking about the regulation of crypto. I have a little bit of skepticism because there are, I think, valid concerns around it.
Most powerful government supporting crypto?
I think it's an iconic 97 seconds, actually. I mean, it's very emblematic of what's been going on over the past few years. I mean, if I were to parse the real significant high points of that, you have Andrew, who represents mainstream media, stating, I can't get through an interview without talking about this. Roll the clock back 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think that was true. So that's the mainstream media embracing the Reformation. Then you have Janet saying, then you have Andrew saying, you know, a nation state has considered adopting Bitcoin as a technology for payments. I think that's a second iconic thing. I think when she says lots of Americans have this as part of their investment strategy, that's a third iconic event. She says we got to regulate it responsibly. That's nothing more than what you would expect any adult working in an administration to say. You would say the same thing if I put you in charge of something. I got to handle it responsibly. And then the final statement, and Andrew kind of cuts her off slightly, where she says, we're going to create an environment where innovation can continue, right? Was a pretty big deal. And in essence, it's the White House, the most powerful government in the world.
How Biden administration has affected crypto?
Can this oligarch make it harder to trace his money if he hops from one blockchain to another, if he deposits those tokens into a couple of wallets that don't require him to provide identifying information, and if he uses a mixing service that launders his money with other people's money?
I think if you roll the clock back to the entry of the Biden administration, the seminal events in the industry were Biden being elected. Biden has been very constructive with regard to innovation. If you look at the financial regulators that came in with the Biden administration, including Janet Yellen and Gary Gensler and the like, they're very informed, very constructive. If you actually, you could say this was a surprise, but if you looked at the written testimony that Janet Yellen gave while she was being vetted by Congress, while they were deciding on her appointment, she said pretty much the same words that she just said to Andrew in that 1 minute clip. She said, we need to responsibly regulate it, and this is a force for innovation and good and progress. And I think Gensler has said the same thing, and I think the other administrators, the other regulators have said the same thing. So I agree with the observation. Last week was a massive milestone, but if you were surprised by last week, you weren't paying attention for the past year and a half, because all of the indicators that the political system, the White House, Congress, and the Senate are pro-crypto and pro-Bitcoin.
Self-constructed controversies? Morgan Stanley's chief global strategist, Ruchir Sharma, has argued that Bitcoin could end the dollar's reign, or at least that the digital currency poses a significant threat to the greenback supremacy. A Financial Times headline proposes, even more ominously, that Bitcoin's rise reflects America's decline. Question stands, does crypto currently have any major opposition? Let's find out.
Yeah, but I mean, she's not the only one. You got Brad Sherman. He's another one that wears that cap, and there are many others. In fact, I think I saw someone taking on Nayib Bukele on Twitter with this new Senate bill, right? So I mean, there is some opposition to it.
You're acting like a media person. You're just kind of picking at us to try to create controversy. In fact, there's no controversy. The majority of Congress likes what's happening. The majority of the Senate is supportive of Bitcoin. The majority of regulators in the White House are in support of Bitcoin. The majority of regulators everywhere in the world are supportive of Bitcoin. And if what you want to do is use it as digital property, there's not even any controversy. But you have to dig for the controversy. And if you push hard enough, like they won't let me transfer it secretly without paying taxes on it, and I'm really angry about that, you can find some controversy. But in fact, this is such an obvious innovation in the economy that if people got away from the trollish fixation on finding someone to disagree with a hyperbolic statement I will make, they would realize that there's $100 trillion of money that needs to flow into this economy, and it's not there yet. Everybody is loudly endorsing it if you're listening.
A level of natural resistance.
I think we could all agree that there's natural resistance to extraordinary disruptive change in the human civilization, and there always has been, right? Whether it's electricity or fire or explosives or internet technology or television or music, these kids are listening to crazy stuff on records. There's always that. But if we take a snapshot 3 years ago versus today, you have the CEO of Goldman Sachs, the CEO of JP Morgan. You just had Larry Fink yesterday saying this is an idea whose time has come. You've got this rippling effect through all the big money managers, all the hedge funds, all the bulge brackets. 2 years ago, Merrill Lynch when I started buying Bitcoin, I called Merrill Lynch. They're like, well, we can buy you some gold. We can't buy Bitcoin.
How far is the era of country adoption?
Any sovereign wealth fund like, UAE or Saudi Arabia or Norway or Switzerland that would hold big tech stocks, if you would hold $10 billion worth of Apple or Google or Facebook or Amazon, I think some of those will roll into Bitcoin because it's just another tech investment for them, and it's totally within their mandate. I think that some countries are being forced to consider other payment options. I mean, like the Russians are being forced. If you get kicked off of SWIFT, that drives and catalyzes something. And then I think it'll be a while, but we're really waiting for a small, mid-sized company that has its own currency to print its currency and buy Bitcoin. I don't think it's a this year thing or a next year thing, but at some point somebody will figure it out. If you're selling $50 billion worth of commodities or exports every year, and you're using the dollar as your treasury reserve asset, you're propping up $100 trillion currency, inflating it then 15-20% a year.
The question of rationality. Warren Buffett has compared cryptocurrencies to the 17th century Dutch tulip craze, while Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey cautioned, buy them only if you're prepared to lose all your money. Economist Nouriel Roubini called Bitcoin the mother or father of all scams, and even criticized its underlying technology. Cryptocurrencies may or may not persevere as speculative investment vehicles, but they are triggering transformative changes to money and finance. As the technology matures, stablecoins will hasten the ascendance of digital payments, ushering out paper currency. The prospect of competition from such private currencies has prodded central banks around the world to design digital versions of their currencies. That brings us to the question of rationality in crypto adoption. Let's hear Saylor's 2 cents on the matter.
If people were rational, I don't think they are, by the way. Luckily for us, 98% of them aren't, because you couldn't be in the top 2% if everybody else was as smart or smarter than you. They're not really totally rational, but if you were rational, the obvious thing to do if you're an export country is you start exporting in Bitcoin, and then you sweep your cash flows into Bitcoin, and then, you probably make like $500 billion or $1 trillion because you did that if you're the first mover. Who will do that? Well, I mean, why wouldn't you do that, by the way? Why hasn't Apple bought $20 billion of Bitcoin and made $100 billion overnight yet? The answer is they're afraid, and they have political constraints. They're afraid of their shareholders. The accounting makes it ugly. You wonder, why don't they just bend over and make $1 trillion? Remember when I tweeted to Elon, I said, I didn't say buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I said buy $10 billion worth of Bitcoin and then issue $10 billion of converts and buy 10 billion more, and you make $100 100 billion, and then all the S&P follows you and you make $1 trillion. Well, he didn't quite do that, right? I mean, he did a little bit. I'm okay with the $1.5 billion, but the point is, why doesn't someone do a $25 billion buy at Google? And the answer is because politics and institutional inertia. And, some people don't want the trillion. Okay, so why doesn't a government do it? Politics, institutional inertia. When will they do it? Well, that this is the butterfly effect, right, guys? It's like, how do you predict when someone gets whacked on the side of the head and knocked out of their comfort zone and decides to go and bend over and pick up the $1 trillion?
So-
I don't know, right? Like, my real point is, any of 1,000 people could do it, and maybe none of them will do it. But if you're betting that not a single one of them wants the $1 trillion, I mean, it seems to me like over a decade, somebody wants the $1 trillion.
With that, we come to the end of this video. Consider subscribing to join in on our future content.